Welcome to another Skills First Beginner Workshop for developing your enterprising skills. I'm Kathleen Webb, the founder and president of Skill Squirrel, and it is my pleasure for Skill Squirrel to host this series for Biz Coach Services. Today is session number 9, and our topic is Business Plan Basics. If you are needing inspiration to write your business plan, this session will be very useful. Today, you will learn about the basics of what goes into a business plan, tips on success factors, the importance of product mix, and the critical components that, when compiled, will form a comprehensive plan for how you would like your business to run. Our presenter from Biz Coach Services is Vern Vautour. Vern has more than 35 years of experience providing small business coaching, training, and consulting. His many accomplishments include presenting small business, life, and career planning workshops for the cities of Toronto, Mississauga, St. Catharines, various colleges and universities, and many nonprofits and Indigenous organizations. He has also adjudicated and provided training for business pitch competitions, and he has held senior operations and marketing management positions with major franchises. Plus, Vern won a major national award in Best Practices in Youth Entrepreneurship Training in Canada. Over to you, Vern.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about business plan basics. So what goes into a business plan, some pointers and tips about it. So let's get started. So what does go into a business plan, and how is a business plan used? This workshop is going to show you the basics. So what we'll cover today is why a plan, what the contents and outline of a plan. I'll show you a sample plan, and then we'll wrap up with some planning tips. So why a plan? There's a number of really good reasons why we potentially would like to have a business plan. In fact, you'll find that 80% of successful businesses have or use formal business plans. Now, having said that, and looking at things in the abstract, it means that potentially there are 20% of businesses that don't do business planning or formal business planning, and they're successful too. But for the most part, these are documents that we potentially need when we're applying for funding, applying for or making new partnerships or setting up new partnerships, going in new directions. So it's extremely important in terms of a strategic planning tool. So some of the things that reasons why we need a plan is it actually helps you to define and document your business model. So now you put it on paper. So we got all kinds of ideas, but when we reduce it to paper, now we've got something a little bit firm and solid that we can actually follow. We want to establish our mission and purpose, as well as demonstrate. We need to prove that there's a market size and that an opportunity exists. We need to define and talk about our operational setup. We have to define the scope and the size of the operations. In fact, in a business plan, we can actually talk about what the business size and scope is going to be initially, and then we can talk about how we're going to scale the business into the future, which makes for very good strategic planning. Of course, you want to talk about your connections and affiliations. You definitely want to show your pricing strategy and your budgets. You want to potentially attract funding and or investors. You definitely need to demonstrate your financial feasibility. You need to acknowledge your risks and the rewards, and an action plan. So it seems to me, and I've been working with thousands of clients since 1994 on business planning, and I can tell you that business plans usually do result in higher success rates. That's in my humble opinion and experience. So let's get into the basic business plan outline. So I usually hold my hand up and I say, here is a business plan. And it usually has a bunch of different sections. I know I only have 5 digits here, but that I'm holding up, and there's 8 on this page. But usually there's a cover page and table of contents, and then you've got your history or about. So that's one section, and then marketing and research, then operations and management. We could separate all these categories out. We can have just market research, then we can have market planning, then we can have operations, and then management. There's many different variations. If you go online and look for business plan outlines, oh my gosh, there's thousands of them. But I'm going to follow my prescribed opinion and view. So I'm going to share some insights with you, and hopefully you'll agree with me. You don't need to agree, that's fine too. But the point is, so we need financial budgets. We need a summary and an action plan. You should have an appendices in your business plan. You should have all the supporting information that helped you to conclude or come and present the summary that you have. I've written business plans for not-for-profit organizations that are 150 pages long, and the appendices was just the same length, about 150 pages of appendices. And then, of course, is the executive summary. Now, I know that I numbered it, but to be honest, an executive summary, when I hold my hand up, an executive summary is that opposing digit. It's a standalone document. I don't normally number them. I don't normally put them in a business plan. It's a standalone document that potentially, at best, I might present to a banker, or it's a summary. So if I'm making a presentation, it's a 1 or 2 pager. So I call the executive summary the resume of my business plan. And I don't normally number the pages. I'll put it at the end, or I won't even have it in there. I'll just have it as a standalone document. However, there are different variations, and you can do it your way. And you're no worse for doing it whichever way that communicates the best. So when we start looking at the different components, I'll break them down. I'll just show you a couple of examples, quick examples. But we need a cover page. And so the cover page needs to include the title, maybe your logo, who it's written for, who it's written by, and then the month and the year. So in this case, I know that it's very tiny. It's very difficult to see because it's hard to put a full page in a very small space. But the point is that you can see that that you need it. You should have a cover page, and then of course a table of contents. So I'm not going to get into the table of contents, but one of the things that I'll point out when you do a business plan, make sure you put the page numbers in. Make sure that you number your pages on your business plan, and double check at the end that all your pages in your table of contents matches up to the page numbers in your business plan. I adjudicate, or I mark a lot of business plans all the time, and I find that's one of the number one error that people make, and they don't realize how potentially important that is. Because if I am looking at a business plan, I want to be able to go to that page and find the information. I don't want to hunt and peck and try to find info. So the next section, of the first section of the business plan, should be history or about. So why did you get involved in this business? Tell me the story about you or about your company, or what's the history of the company. It can be an existing company, or it can be a new company. And don't be afraid to, like I get a lot of business people that they talk about what influenced them in their lives. Or they talk about, what's the important things or events that happened in their life that might have gotten them to be interested in doing this business. Also, you want to just have a brief overall products and service list. So what you do is just a quick list. Even if they're bullet points, you don't want to go overboard in terms of describing your products and services. Not yet. You can get into that later. You can delve down in, but you want that big picture thinking initially. Then you should potentially think about the features and benefits. And I'll tell you a little bit later why features and benefits are really extremely important to understand. And then you have your mission and purpose. So make your mission and purpose SMART. But what I mean by that is make your mission and purpose statements specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. In other words, don't just have broad statements that says I'm going to be the biggest company in North America What you're doing is you're boasting, but you're not really, those aren't smart statements. They're not specific, they're not measurable, they're not achievable, they're not realistic. So the beauty of a business plan is that it's a working plan. It's always in progress. But at this particular time, this is what we're planning. Our goal is to achieve this by, our goal is to be, to have 100 clients by the end of year 1, to have 1,000 clients by the end of year 5, and to have 2 different divisions or 3 locations, or to increase our product mix to different levels, to increase the number of potential target markets or market segments over time. So we actually want to talk about that in our mission and purpose. And then the critical success factors, very important to understand that every single business has a unique set of items that are extremely important to the running of that business. So for example, I know this is a simple example, but for example, if I wanted to be a hairdresser, I would have to have I'd have to be certified, and I'd have to have my credentials to do hair. Right or wrong? Not necessarily. If I start a hairdressing business, I need to hire and make sure that the people have that. So all of a sudden that becomes a critical success factor. If I'm a mobile operation, for example, then a vehicle is important. Very important. Another critical success factor for, let's say, a service-based business is that I have to be well-groomed and personable. Those are things that are extremely important to that business. If I go into a different kind of business, all the critical success factors potentially change. And I'm going to show you why that's important in a few minutes. When we do our market research, what we actually want to do is we want to summarize, and we want to look at the size of the industry. We want to show gaps in the market. We need to identify trends and opportunity. And we have to introduce or talk about how the industry is made up. So potentially the history of the industry, what the game board looks like. That's what we want to do, is what does the game board look like? Now, when we're starting out in business and we're just starting out and it's a small part-time self-employment, that's completely different than when we're hitting in the big leagues. So you've got so many different levels. So we want to describe the industry and point out where we fit in. That's extremely important. The next thing is that we have our target market. And the way I look at target market is I look at it in 3 different levels. So when you decide, or when you talk about your target market, you identify your geographics, your territory, north, east, west, and south. Your geographic territory can be a neighborhood, a town, a local area, regional, can be national, international, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, we need to show, we're gonna have to show research on the size of our market depending on the geographic territory. Demographics allows us to look at the culture, the size, the industry, age, education, gender, religion, income. There are certain characteristics about my customers that I need to identify with. So for example, if I'm looking for, let's say, high-level women who work in like high-level professionals that make in excess of $90,000 to $120,000 a year, then I can go to census tracts, I can get statistics, and I can actually tell you in a given geographic location. So once I identify the geographic location, I can actually get secondary data either from cities or census tracts or census information or statistics from the federal government that actually breaks down how many people, how many professional women might be working that earn between 90 and 120,000 or 120,000 plus. And I can actually find out in a given geographic area how many people there are in a finite number. And so it's very important to understand the demographics of our target audience. So we can define that. Once we define that, Now what we need to do is we need to get into the psychographics. So the psychographics are people who become our stakeholders. They're the people who decide to work with us. It's all about their behaviors, their lifestyle, their culture. All those things are part of my psychographics. So who is, and this is really important when I'm surveying clients or looking for clients, I need to identify who my ideal client is. Who are my ideal clients? So when I start questioning or I start looking or surveying for people, I can ask those qualified questions. I can go to the right businesses and or the right industries, and I can get data from different associations that, and I might pick an industry sector as well, right? So there's all kinds of, once I break my geographics down, my demographics down, now I look for my ideal customer, my psychographics. So if I can do that, it makes my job a lot easier, and I can tap into that. I can figure out how I can tap into that market, and I can now start to deliver or develop those relationships. Now, when I look at marketing mix and segments, okay, I've got an example here, and I just wanted to sort of show how that works. But let's talk about economics. When we took economics in grade school, we learned that economics is about supply and demand, right? So your growth, and I hate to say this, but your growth in business is limited to your resources, your supply. Once I established the size of an industry, when I look at industry statistics, 9 times out of 10, I can guarantee that the industry is in the millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And yet you want to start a business, and what do you need per year to start your business? 100,000, 50,000, a million, 10 million. At the end of the day, even 100 million in some industries is really just a drop in the bucket as it relates to the size and the scope and the opportunities within that industry. But the thing is that we can, whatever our supply is, whatever resources we bring to the table, we're limited by the resources that we have. So even though the market is absolutely huge and gigantic, the thing is that we're limited by the resources. And the resources include things like the money that we put into the business, our ability to borrow money, other people's money, our education, our critical success factors, personalities, education, equipment, all kinds of things that go in, creativity, maybe our education and our credentials, etc. So all those things become our supply. It becomes this is what I have to offer, and I'm usually limited by what I actually bring to the table. And yet I've got a market out there, the demand I know is huge, but how do I tap into that? So more often than not, demand can't be met due to your limited resources, right? So it's up to you to fix that. And so that's why it's important to understand. And for example, the example here I have is that we also need to put our products and services, our supply, we can have a product mix. We can mix our categories up. So for example, I'm a small business coach, consultant, and trainer. So I offer 3 different services: coaching, training, and consulting. Those are all priced out differently. So basically, those are all income centers for my business. When I look at a potential business like Tim Hortons, they have 4 main areas, and each one of those are income centers. And I have to actually measure and manage my categories, my product mix categories. So for example, Tim Hortons has coffee and beverages as one category, donuts and pastries, soups and salads, entrees, and other. In my budgeting and in my sales planning, you'll see that I have to look at each one of these individually because my markups, my gross profits are all different. How I charge for training versus how I charge for consulting versus how I charge for coaching is completely different. So I need to recognize that I have different income strategies and I have different markets, and they might also be seasonal. So there's all, when I look at a whole year, some will be up at some times of the years, and some categories will be down in some time of the year. Other categories we can introduce temporarily, etc. Now, when I look at the market segments and look at my segments or my demand, I have to split them into target market groups. So even if you're Tim Hortons, you might, for every market segment, for every demand group, guess what? You have to have a separate marketing budget and a separate way or method to actually do your outreach to those clients. You don't have the same advertising and promotional budget for every client going to Tim Hortons. No, you break it down into target market groups. So we potentially have ads, and we have marketing communications to our clients for families, for offices, for the breakfast crowd, for business people, for lunch, dinner, the weekend crowds. So you can see that your market segments, your demand can vary as well. So when we can understand what we can offer a client based on our resources, and then we look at the different segments, hey, we can build a business. But we have to understand who they are, and we have to be able to communicate with them. When we look at current business capabilities, part of the business plan includes a SWOT analysis and a competition analysis. Now, the beauty is that I'll just tell you what SWOT is briefly. A SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. That's about you. That's about your company. That's about your team. What are your team's strengths and weaknesses? What's your company's strengths and weaknesses? What are your strengths and weaknesses? So we have to be brutally honest when we do a SWOT analysis, because the idea is to identify the strengths and talk about how we can build on those strengths, and also to identify our weaknesses and then show how we can overcome or mitigate our risk as it relates to those weaknesses. Then we have opportunities and threats. Opportunities and threats are external. Those are things we can't control. We can't control the weather. We can't control disease, or we can't control war, politics. There's a lot of things that we can't control, but we can also spot opportunities, and we can also look at threats. And again, just like strengths and weaknesses, when we have opportunities and we see them, we have to note how we can take advantage of those opportunities. When we have the threats, we have to look at how can we reduce our threats. So that's a snapshot. It's a snapshot of where we are today. That snapshot we take today is going to be completely different in a year from now. So it's important that we do SWOT analysis on a regular basis so that we monitor our progress. Now, here's an interesting thought. If we do what I call our critical success factors. Remember I said earlier, if I'm a hairdresser, I need certification. I have to be personable. I might need a car if I'm mobile. Well, guess what? I can put those critical success factors into my SWOT analysis. In other words, am I strong or am I weak in those areas? And what am I going to do to fix it? When I do a competition analysis, I'm going to do a competition analysis and look at and compare my business to 3 or several other businesses. And what I'm going to do is I'll make a note. How long have they been around? What's their reputation? Do they have a website? What's their product mix? What are their average prices? So when I do my competition analysis, I can put my SWOT, my strengths and my weaknesses, and the critical success factors up against my competition as well. And now what I can do is I can actually say, here's my competitive advantage. So I can actually separate that out and show why my business is unique. So we need to take a snapshot of where we are now. That's in a business plan. And our business plan is a living document. It's something that you just don't write it and walk away from it. You write it, you walk away from it, and you come back every year or every 2 years, and you give your business a big lens treatment, and you say and compare. You figure out, did I do what I said I was going to do? And if I didn't, what do I need to do to fix it? Or what direction should I now go in? So it's a plan is always in progress, right? So now we have to look at our marketing communications. So our marketing communications includes a promotional plan, media mix, potential reach, and our sales targets. So how are we going to make business? How are we going to communicate with our customers and clients? So it's very important to establish that and make sure that we have something that's comparable, that's going to work in the business and the industry that we're in. The next section of a business plan is the operations and management. This is a huge section or a huge part of a business, right? So it really encompasses all the functional areas of marketing, operations, finance, human resources, and strategic planning. When I'm looking at putting a business plan together, the way I think of a business plan, I think of it as a puzzle. If I look at a puzzle, it has all kinds of different pieces. And the thing is that all these different functional areas, they actually fit in together. There's overlap, there's similarities. So when I change one thing in a business plan, I might have to change all the other functional areas. So it's very important to get things down on paper and finalize things. And again, it's like a snapshot. It's a snapshot of where we are now and what we might plan in the future. So here's some components of a good business plan that has an operations and management section. I think there's 3 or 4 pages. There's actually 2 pages with a number of different items that you should be talking about and addressing in your operations and management operations plan. So for example, legal organization. So I can state that my legal organization potentially will be or is a sole proprietorship. I can tell you when it was registered. I can tell you who owns it, what province it was registered in. Like those are the types of things that I need to do to identify my legal organization. Now, here's an interesting thought. Where I'm going to be now and where I want to be in the future are 2 different things, potentially. So if they are potentially 2 different things, if I want to write a great business plan, now I start thinking about scaling the business. So I might say right now I'll be a sole proprietor, but in the future, we hope to convert into a corporation or a cooperative or a not-for-profit or what have you. So the point is that I show my plan as, again, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So again, I can peel off all these topics and I can talk about them, what I'm going to do now and how I'm going to scale it in the future. I can do that. It's up to me. Or I can just write the plan and say, this is what it is now. But I really need to plan outside of just a year. What am I going to be doing in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? So I need to think about what the business is going to look like and how it's going to evolve. So that's really important to think about when I'm looking at operations. So what's the start date of my business? What are my hours of operations? Who are my management personnel and what are their roles? And I include subcontracting in that. If I have or I'm planning to hire staff down the road or contract workers or whatever, I can talk about that. Who do I use for professional supports, right? So we might have bookkeepers, accountants, lawyers, coaches, etc. Then service and production. So I want to do a list and I want to actually document how I'm going to do my service and production and my processes and specifications. So for example, it shows how ready you are for your business. I can set up my, so for example, I could actually detail my processes or my service and production. So for example, post contact information on internet. When somebody responds, respond within 24 hours. So that becomes a process. That becomes a specification. Find out what the client's looking for. Get back to them with a quotation within 48 hours or whatever it is that you want to do. There's processes involved in every kind of business. So you have to recognize what they are. Again, we want to talk about costs, prices, and markup. So I want to make sure that whatever products and services I offer, that I'm actually making, I have a fair markup and/or I have fair pricing. So I can pit that up against my competition. I can see what's going on in the marketplace, but I do want to show how much profit I can make, what my costs are, what my sale prices are, and I need to do that for each product mix or service mix area that I have. Also, we want to talk about our channels of distribution. Now, in some cases, channels of distribution are talked about differently, but my understanding, or the way I use channels of distribution, is how am I going to get my product to my customer, right? So what is the vehicle that I use to get my products and or service to my customers? So I might be a bricks and mortar business. I might be e-commerce. I might be a hybrid of the two, but I need to talk about how I get my products or service to my customers. Those are my channels of distribution. Next, we have client service policies. So for example, my client service includes, I need to get a deposit with each order. I need to tell you what my warranties are. What's going to happen if a client calls you up and says they don't want the product, they want to return it? Or they call you up and say the product was broken. I received it was broken, or you didn't deliver the service well enough. What are you going to do? What are your policies? Are you going to return? Are you going to repair? Right? Who's going to pay the shipping? Right? So again, you need to create the rules of your business. And the great thing is that if you do end up scaling the business up and you end up growing with more than one employee, or you have tons or teams of people, guess what? These are the makings of your operations manuals. These are the processes and the procedures that we follow. Then we have insurance required. So almost every business needs some sort of liability insurance. So you really should look into different kinds of insurance that you have. Some businesses might require being registered with WSIB. So those are the types of things we need to identify in our operations plan. Then what licenses and what registration do you need? It's a great idea to check your municipality and the province and the federal government in order to determine what licenses and requirements there might be. So for example, if I'm in the landscape business, I might have to have certification for spraying chemicals. If I'm climbing up on roofs and fixing houses, putting eaves troughs in, I might have to have certification for use of ladders. Maybe I need my first aid, etc. Definitely need to be signed up for WSIB. So we need to figure out what is it that you need for your business. So this is all part of your research. This is all part of documenting what your business is going to look like. Then our location and setup. So am I a home-based office? Am I a mobile organization? Do I have a bricks and mortar location? Maybe I have warehouse and a shipping location is different than my home-based office, is different than my bricks and mortar location. So we need to talk about how am I set up? What does my setup look like? Then we need to address web and media. So we need to talk about social media, the different types of communications that we're going to have with clients in order to build up our brand, in order to build up our rapport and relationships with customers. So very important. What major contracts and agreements are we going to be getting involved in? Well, they can include leases, bank agreements, vehicle purchases, supplier agreements. So nobody can tell me that there's not some sort of a major contract or agreement involved in a business. So what do they look like? So the more detail I put in, the better. And if it's just, I'm just starting out now, I might mention it, but I also might extend my business description into the future. Again, scaling it. I'll show you some examples of scaling in a few minutes. And then we have intellectual property. So guess what? If you have a domain name, that's intellectual property. If you have a registered business name, that's intellectual property. If you have copyrighted information or trademarks or patents, that's intellectual property. So we should list our actual intellectual property and make sure that we document that. And it's great because if someone reads at a bank or what have you, they see what collateral and what value your business brings to the marketplace. Of course, we need to develop suppliers and vendors. So even though we might not be product oriented, we still might have vendors. We work with banks. We work with companies that potentially provide office supplies or what have you. So again, we should be listing or talking about our suppliers and vendors now and potentially in the future. If you're a product-based business, you should also include what are your inventory controls. So show that you're set up and that you're ready to go. So the next section is financial budgeting. So this is just a summary of what goes into a financial budget, but you need to list your startup requirements. You need to address your pricing and your costing. You should have a sales plan, at least for the first year, and you should have that broken down monthly by number of units, by average sale price, by average cost price, and also by my product or my service mix, because they're going to vary by season and they're going to vary by pricing. And so what we want to do is we want to establish our revenue less our cost of goods to give us our gross margin or our gross profit before expenses. Then we need the cash flow. For me, in a small business, especially if you're self-employed or you're a small business, the cash flow rules. Absolutely. And so in a cash flow, we want to make sure that we have no accumulated balances of minus. It's impossible. So somewhere, somehow, the money has to come, it has to flow from somewhere. So our dollars in our cash flow either flow in from revenues or money we put in the business, or our partners put in the business, or grants, or loans, right? So cash flow is money into the business, and then outflows are our direct costs, cost of goods, and all our expenses. And then if we have loans, we have to show our loan payments. And then the most important thing about a cash flow, in my humble opinion, after the bottom line, after all the income and expenses, is how much do I get? So the owner has to plan how much they're going to earn in a year and put the cash flow together. And when you look, like I said, when you look at your accumulative balance at the end, you're going to end up knowing exactly what your position is by the end of a year. It's good to do monthly for the first year and then 2 annual, like one annual for the second year and 1 annual column for the third year. It's not critical that you have a detailed month by month for every single year. Now, having said that, I'm talking to people who are self-employed and small businesses. But once we get into larger businesses, then the scaling has to ramp up significantly. Typically a business plan is anywhere from, I don't know, 12 to 35 pages plus an appendices, whereas I've written plans that are 155 pages long with 150-page appendices. And because it was an existing business that had been around for years, I had to have income statements and cash flow for the past 5 years. And then I would have to do the next 5 years by month in 3 different scenarios. So 15 cash flows, 15 income statements, and 5 balance sheets. So again, like you can see that the depth and the scope, the size of the business is really going to vary. But usually in a small business, I do cash flow for 1 year. That's it. 1 year cash flow by the month. And then I try it if I can, or if it's needed, I can extend one into year 2, year 3. It's quite easy, actually. We also have to establish the sources and the uses of our funds. So that has to backtrack and fit in with the cash flow statement. Then we have to figure out our break even. Now, break even is where all the income I bring into a business equals all the expenses. So I neither make a profit nor do I make a loss. That's called break even. So at that point, I'm a happy camper because I've reached break even, just hopefully in the first year. And we need to show that our business is sustainable, but we also need to know how many units we have to sell and what the sales level is, so that we can do better cash flow documents. Now, income statement and balance sheet for small self-employed business, for small business or self-employment, I don't usually lean on having to do income statements and balance sheets, because at the end of the day, the only time I really need to do an income statement is tax time. So I do my income statement at the end of every year, so that's once a year. And then the balance sheet is really your net worth statement. And I really don't need that unless I'm selling the business or I want to know what the value, what my net worth is at any given point in time. So usually the bigger my business, the more important it becomes. But usually all the small businesses that I work with, income statement and balance sheet, not so important, but keep in mind that the income statement is important and it has to be done once a year when you do your income taxes. And then building a good set of assumptions. So when you have an income statement or a cash flow statement or a sales plan, what we want to do is we want to identify with some of the assumptions that we need in our business. So the idea behind financial budgets is to demonstrate that your business is financially feasible. At the end of my business plan, I'm going to show risks and rewards. So what are the risks of this business, but what are the rewards? And then I need to create an action plan. So again, that sort of summarizes my business plan. Maybe I have an executive summary attached, maybe I don't, but I need to show that this business is doable. Yes, there are risks, but here are the rewards. In an appendices, interestingly, an appendices can, for the most part, again, depending on the size of the business, right? It's really going to depend. But things that you can add into your appendices that lends your business plan credibility is a bibliography. That's the sources of all the information that you collected. Product samples. Maybe you show pictures or explain your products or potentially your services. Your intellectual property. So if you have trademarks or you have a website or what have you, or you have your logo, like your logo could be your intellectual property as well. So you show those things. Maybe you show competitor information, supplier information. You definitely need your bio or your resume to set up as credibility, but also you introduce yourself at the beginning of your business plan where you talk about, right? Then, of course, your research background, if you've done surveys, what the results are. If you have sales and marketing materials, you can add them in. And depending on the scope, the size, the age of a company, other materials that I've seen added into plans might include, but they're not limited to. You know, sometimes they're demanded by, potentially a lender, where you have to include past financial statements, past tax returns, potentially team member resumes, potential lists of clients, evidence of research, contract templates, credit history, rental agreements, supplier contracts, proof of intellectual property, website layout, press kits, press releases, articles about your business, or any other information that might give readers a more detailed information. So you can see we started out with a simple business plan, and it can be simple, but it can be large and complex. So we've got to think about the business as we start up now and then into the future. You'll find that things get a lot more complex, but at the same time, you've documented everything, and that's a good thing. Now, what you might want to do is attach an executive summary, and the executive summary is really the resume of the business plan. It's a 2-pager. That's it. So it's just highlights. It's like your talking points. So a little bit about the company, the market research summary, maybe the size of the industry, who your target audiences are, your product mix and service mix, your operations and management setup, some of the key financial highlights, and a summary and some of your key actions. 2 pages, 1 page, 2 pages. That's it. No more, no less. So here's a simple business plan, a sample plan that is sort of representative of what some business plans might look like. So I'll just run through it. I'll show you some key features of it, and I'll just do a quick run through. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to read the whole darn thing, but at least I'll give you some of the key features as per some of the tips and processes that I've shown you as it relates to writing the plan. So this is a business plan. You've got a cover page. Then you've got a table of contents. Please note that there's the page numbers on the bottom of each page. And then I have a table of contents. Please note that whatever the page numbers of each of the sections are, you make sure that they match up at the end. In this case, the client has chosen to put the executive summary at the very beginning. So again, the executive summary is a 1 or 2 pager. So it's the big overview statements, the overall statements. So you can see a business description, trends in market research, target market, your business goals, operations summary. So this is sort of the big picture of what your potential business looks like, who your operations and location, who your management is, some financial highlights, followed by risks and rewards. So that's a typical executive summary. 2 pages, that's it. Even if you have a 150-page business plan, chances are you'll have a 2 or 3 page executive summary. Not too long. It could be more, but it's the higher level thinking. And then we've got about the company. So the first section is about the company. You talk about the history and description. Again, your overall products and services. This is the big picture. As I mentioned, in terms of mission and purpose, we have Chabelle Shoes and Accessories. So to become the #1 Canadian online shoe store and accessory specializing in women's and men's shoe sizes from 10 to 14 by 2022. Now, this was written in 2017, right? So establish, open, and operate a factory outlet for women and men's shoes in longer sizes by 2019 in Toronto, serving the GTA. Be recognized as value pricing in plus-size shoes, handbags, and hypoallergenic fashion jewelry. Establish a brand line and distribution network in Canada's major centers by 2022. Now, I'll be honest with you, when we look at the SWOT analysis here, we'll understand why the business didn't survive, and it didn't, unfortunately. There was a lot of things that had changed. And so when I go to SWOT analysis, I'll just demonstrate what happened. Actually, this person is still in business, but it's not called Chabelle Shoes. She's doing an absolute fantastic business in handbags and bling. It ended up being, a turn. But the opportunities came up, the threats came up, changed the flavor of her business. But at the same time, because she had a business plan, she was able to deal with all this stuff without effort, without too many issues and problems. So the mission and purpose in this case, it's smart, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Now what you want to do, and this is really important, you can take your features and benefits. I'm going to share something with you that's important about features and benefits. In this case, she kept everything at a high level. So she's got the products that she's talking about features. And so we've got shoes, handbags, and jewelry. But she talked about, in big level thinking, broad brush strokes, she talked about features and benefits. But if you have several, like if you just have a few products or a few services, it's really important to break them down individually. So basically, if I sell, if I sell a casual shoe, then I want to talk about the features of that casual shoe and the benefits of having that casual shoe. Guess what? I'm building my narrative for my website. I'm building my narrative for when I talk to people and talk about my products and services. I'm building my narrative for my brochures and my advertising and my promotion, right? And I'm also able to compare that to my competitors. So it makes it so much easier when I break down my features and benefits. And another added bonus is that for the most part, there's 4 major personality styles. And depending on people's style, their personality styles, it may be an advantage to mention and focus on the features rather than the benefits. And with some personalities, it's better to focus on the benefits rather than the features or vice versa. So it's really important to work with features and benefits, and the other thing too is that we've got critical success factors. And again, her target market was the Afrocentric market who wear extra long shoes, tall women, and heavy women who have extra wide shoes. She was very well versed and tapped into that. She was Afrocentric herself. And so the critical success factors was affordable, wearable shoes in plus sizes and extra wide for fashionable Afrocentric women. So now she can take that critical success factor and she can put it up against her SWOT analysis. Am I strong in that or am I weak in that? What about my competitors? Do my competitors offer these things? And then another critical success factor for her was private label manufacturers who can provide smaller to larger scale runs of products. She was actually getting her products out of the United States. My goodness, she had a fantastic supplier, really good prices that really gave her a competitive advantage. The other thing, so I'll get into that and I'll show you some things that happen in a minute. But now what we need to do is you need to look at market research so you can see overall industry and trends. She dug down a little deeper. You get the basic statistics. So according to Statistics Canada, footwear sales is a $3.8 billion industry in Canada. So if I cite that and I show that in my appendices, it gives my business plan credibility. Some other things too that we did research on. We did research on the history of the footwear industry in Canada. Well, we looked at key trends. We looked at the types of establishments. We looked at different industry segments. So this is the bigger picture, or we're getting into the actual industry, the shoe industry. So the beauty is that we're defining everything, and then we're going to bring it back to our business and show how we fit into that market. So you can see industry segments are family shoe stores, specialty shoe stores, department stores, apparel, vendor or factory outlets, mail order, online web stores, etc. Then you can see different product niche categories: athletic, dress, casual, sandals, work duty, hiking, hunting, fishing, winter boots, and Western boots. Yes, it's billions of dollars industry, but I'm not focused on those niches, right? I'm focused on maybe dress shoes and casual shoes and sandals. That's it. Maybe some winter boots, but I'm not into the other areas. Then what I can do is she showed her leading competitive brands, right? So these are leading typical North American casual brands. And then she got into designer lady shoes. Then she looked at identifying with three competitors in the marketplace. And then we go to our target market. So when we look at demographics, okay, we're looking at 3 things. Number 1, geographics. So she mentions it here, although it's not titled, but she's looking at the Afrocentric niche market communities in the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, including Toronto, Downsview, Etobicoke, Scarborough, Mississauga, Ajax, and Brampton. Now, when we get into our demographics, through a survey, City of Toronto website, we actually can look at the breakdown of some of the different uh, uh, ethnic groups of people. And then we look at the frequency of purchase. So we got this from a poll of 1,009 women. The average woman owns 17 pairs of shoes. They wear 3 pairs regularly. They usually buy 3 pairs per year, and they pay an average of $49 a pair. That was in 2017. Customer psychographics, when we look at, habits, different things that habits, attitudes, behaviors, we identified with 31% of women have paid more than $100. 39% considered themselves a shoe person. 59% of women get blisters from their shoes. Holy mackerel, where do people get this stuff, right? 19% of women consider shoe shopping as retail therapy, and 39% prefer flats to heels. So with that kind of information, I can better decide on the brand, not the brand, but the type of shoes, the style of shoes, the price points. Those are the types of things that I'm looking for. Now, here's an example of scaling the business over a 5-year period. So geographically, we're looking at the GTA, and then we're extending into Southern Ontario, Canada East, Canada West. We will always have online presence right from the very beginning, but in year 1, we're just going to focus on Toronto, Brampton, Scarborough, Mississauga. It makes it so much easier to do a sales plan. It makes it so much easier to decide, in terms of our marketing and developing customer relations. So you can see this is a scaled model of where I'm planning to be in 5 years from now. Then we have SWOT analysis. So our strengths, our weaknesses. So we identify that individual strength. So in this case, experience and character. Then we describe that, and then we go on to respond in terms of how we will build on that strength. When we look at our weaknesses, we identify those, and we describe it, then we look at our responses, how we will overcome or mitigate our risks. When we look at opportunities, GTA ethnic markets, and we look at, like in her case, when she did her research, there were a lot of tall Afrocentric women that wear plus size shoes, sizes 11 to 14. They can't get them in Toronto or Greater Toronto area. So we found that thousands of women would travel to the States. They go US side to get what they want. So the thing is that it became an advantage. It became an opportunity that she saw. But, and here were the threats, and then I'm going to tell you the story here. Some of the things was, some of the threats were new entries, cost of the US dollar. Now, back in 2014, when she was planning this out, and then 2017, when she actually started, the exchange rates are floating around, 8, 12% maybe. Well, now they're up to 30 and 33%. So now it costs way more money to buy a product from the United States and bring it into Canada. Huge, right? So that really impacted on her profit, that impacted on her price points, etc. Now, one of the things that with her supply, she had an awesome supplier. She had a great supplier, but something happened. And what happened is that she started, the company that was providing the shoes started putting soles on the shoes that were made in China. So now all of a sudden the duty went from 5%, because it had foreign product in it, it went to 25%. So there was an extra 20% levy on the duties. That killed her shoe business. The good news is that in her first year, she wasn't selling that many shoes, and she was doing one heck of a business with the handbags and the bling. So that's what she ended up specializing in and going in a different direction. So you can see, by paying attention to your markets, by understanding that there's potential threats and here's how I'm going to respond to them, it really gives her the tools to grow her business and to become successful in spite of her challenges. And then we look at her competitor analysis. These are things that we want to compare, and then we need to differentiate ourselves and basically list what our customer advantages are. What's our competitive advantage? Now, when we get into marketing plan and promotion, we have branding, we have intellectual property, we have social media. In this case, we have year 1, year 2, year 3. We're extending it. And you can see that each X represents the amount of effort or involvement of those products or services. So you can see word of mouth isn't going to be very big in the first year, but and brochures is somewhat involved. We have some in brochures, but business cards are absolutely a plus, have to have those. And then we have a direct market approach. So we can do seasonal kiosks. Then we can increase our presence of seasonal kiosks in the year 2. And then we're going to start private home shoe parties in year 2. Well, of course, that didn't end up coming to fruition, but that's the plan, right? So we can scale that into future years. So, for example, in terms of, we're going to have a website from the beginning. We're going to have Facebook with a lot of involvement. We'll dabble in Instagram in the first year. We'll increase it a little bit into the second year, and then we'll be full throttle by the third year. So you can see that the amount of involvement, like we don't want to start a business and get overwhelmed with too many things. A lot of businesses, for example, they do blogs or they'll do newsletters, and then they're committed to doing the blogs and the newsletters every month. And they're overwhelmed with this stuff. They've got more things to worry about than writing the blogs or writing the newsletters. It's potentially important, especially if it's getting results. But in some cases, it takes away from running and managing the business. You got to be very cognizant of what's going on in your business and what you're spending your time doing. Because after all, blogs and newsletters might not be generating income, whereas that's what you need to focus on. Revenue. So in your sales plan, as you can see, I can just blow this chart up a little bit. And so this is a breakdown of a sales plan. So it's by month, and you can see that there's different categories. So look at the number of units sold or the number of jobs sold. And then we look at the average unit price. So we take the number of units sold times the average unit price, and we can see that our estimated sales are projected into the future. So here's a business where I'm only selling, for the whole year, I'm only selling 690 units. But guess what? I'm making $130,000. Right? Her handbag business took off. It was huge. What she planned was, she planned $43,000 in women's shoe sales, and she ended up doing almost $150,000 in handbags. She didn't know, right? I mean, who knows, right? But you make a business plan, you do your projections, you do the best you can, and you might end up in a different place. But at least you had a plan. So then you've got things about, client service warranties, service plan, then your operations. We've got the legal organization. Everything that I pointed out earlier is all summarized and is shown. So in the case of pricing, what I'm doing is I'm showing the price ranges of our different product mix areas. So I show a range, I show the average sale, the average cost of goods as expressed in dollars and as a percentage, my gross profit, and my average markup. So I can actually keep an eye on what those markups look like. And again, on my cash flow, I can track all this stuff. I've got inventory controls, channels of distribution, labeling, everything is detailed. And so this is the making of a good business plan. And then for financial plans, we have our startup costs, our break even. So I have a summary at the beginning, and I show my sales projections, basic assumptions, and then followed by the actual cash flow. So my cash flow actually shows my revenue streams in, my revenue streams out, and my bottom line. So at the end of the day, you can see on the very bottom line down where owner's draw is, there was no bank loans involved. I'm running positive all through the year. I know she's taking in $143,000, $130,000 in sales, plus her own money, $8,000, plus a starter grant of $5,000. And so her cash flow at the end of the year is she ends up with paying herself $27,000, and she still has an accumulated balance of $31,000, which carries into the next year, which carries into the next year. So the first year she's only drawing $27,000, but she's also carrying forward $31,000 into the next year. And if you look at the next 2 years, it shows that she's paying herself at the bottom there $50,000 and $60,000, and she's running a successful business. Then we have our sources and uses of funds, our startup costs as well, and then risks and rewards. Now this one here doesn't have an action plan. I introduced action plans about 3 or 4 years ago, and I do demand them when I'm running my courses. So appendices include your startup costs, sales plan by the month, the resume of the owner, company logo, and bibliography, what the market research was. So there's my startup costs. And what I normally do is I do a bootstrap version, my minimum. So I have a range, minimum and my preferred. Sales plan by the month, I showed that earlier. Then I have a resume, followed by the company logo, and then a bibliography, some of the sources of the information that I have in the plan. I have my startup costs. I already did that. Oh, sorry, that was duplicated. My apologies. So that's just an idea of a sample plan. And then moving into the last section here, business tips and features. So in creating a solid business plan, we've given you a few good pointers about some of the features you see in the outline. Okay. So here's a couple of things that I'll go over. Just your critical success factors. Remember that every business needs to determine and identify what specific business actions, features, and resources are needed to be done well in order to survive and prosper. Once you understand what those are, now you can apply it to your SWOT analysis to determine whether those are your strengths or weaknesses, and you can apply it against your competitors. So it's really important to understand that, and that you bring the right resources in place. So some examples of critical success factors. Here's a list. It's a quick list. So they might be management. I'm not going to read the list, but there's lots of different things that might go into the success of a business. So for example, Nike, if you look at this list, intellectual property would be important to Nike, licenses, distribution licenses and agreements would be extremely important. The culture, the branding and position would be important. And if you look up Nike's mission statement, there's 140 factories, for example, that produce Nike products around the world, and Nike owns 0. And if you look at their mission statement, they are a marketing and distribution company. That's what they do. They market and distribute. So they do key alliances and distribution agreements. So for example, if Foot Locker might have 4 different pairs of Nike shoes, and they're exclusive, they're not sold anywhere else, but Nike will get the factory in maybe South Korea to produce those running shoes for Foot Locker only, and that's it, right? So they're the ones that control. That's why I say it's a marketing and distribution company, and that's why they produce license agreements, etc. Another thing too is that once we establish critical success factors, and I know I've mentioned this again, but just to summarize, it is important in factors to consider in your SWOT analysis, your competition analysis, and your competitive advantage. The next thing too is knowing your features and benefits. Knowing your features and benefits, that's huge. So if you know your client and you know their personality styles, etc., you can better sell your products and features by understanding the personality, but also it helps you to develop your content for print and web. So for example, on the one hand, this pen, for example, has a rubber grip. The benefit is a better grip and non-slip, right? So a client might come in looking for a pen, and they might say, I want a pen, but I want to make sure that it has, good grip on it. Bang, here it is. There it is. So there's the feature that you're looking for. This pen potentially is retractable. So that prevents leaking. It has a pocket clip that holds it in place. So know your value proposition, know your products, know your services inside and out. In doing the sample business plan that I showed you, it didn't have an action plan, but now I have all my clients, all the training programs that I do on a regular basis now, I have them include an action plan. So I put that on a Gantt chart, right? Because by putting it on a Gantt chart, I get everything organized. And I actually show, okay, well, these are the actions that I need to do, and this is when I need to do them. It really helps a person to get organized and organize the things that they're going to do in their business. In summary, so what's the benefits of a good business plan? Well, it's your business blueprint. You have to establish what you're doing and to show your processes. A business plan is always a work in progress. Yes, I wrote my business plan today, but let's look in a year from now or 2 years from now and update it. It also presents scaling opportunities. And you can also make sure that you establish a working budget and have a plan of action. So I don't know if there's any questions, but yeah. I'll say thank you.